And Jason, maybe you just kind of want to explain.
Yeah, I didn't even know you guys were new members. I didn't.
Oh, I'm old.
Yeah, so there's
I've been sick the past couple of times.
Mm. And Brandon, he isn't here.
he's
He
Yeah.
rolled off. Yeah.
My next step when, this term is over is I'm running for president. I'll be old enough finally.
So how are you doing now?
Sorry.
How are you feeling now that you said you were sick?
Yes, yeah, but it just was like random stuff every time where I was like, shouldn't give the whole meeting COVID. That would be cruel.
okay. So I got the note that we're live streaming, and since we don't have a quorum, we aren't officially having a meeting with any actionable items or taking any votes or anything, but we are gathered and can have discussion and talk about the collection development policy or the items that are on the agenda.
My question was really about the collection development policy and the process.
Sure.
So there's the collection development team. And I'm just curious about the structure of that, who they report to, who, certainly I recognize from reading the policy. They sound like they would be formally educated with experience, they have discipline. I'm not sure, with the tens of thousands of books that get published, how do they go from the tens of thousands down to these are the ones we want? Certainly there's standards, and I understand the standards, but it's more of a question about what is the library intending to do, and because you can't buy 10,000 books every month, you're
Right.
buying X number of books, you have a budget, you're making some decisions.
So for the majority of the purchasing that we do for physical materials, it's decentralized. So each branch has its own materials budget, and they do the majority of the selection for the materials for their branch. Typically, that would fall to the branch manager, who's a professional librarian level position, with training and education, to select the adult materials, and to the children's librarian to select the materials for youth. As far as the collection development team itself, Jamie, Jamie is the chair of that team, so do you want to talk
And
about
that's
that?
for the entire system?
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you do some training development.
So the collection development team is made up of staff. There's 3 standing members on that team, which was myself as the branch services manager. Our technical services manager, technical services is the department in the library that catalogs all of the books. And sorry, there's 4 standing members. The manager of the PAC library downtown has titled the library services manager. And the 4th standing member is the youth services manager. And then there are 3 at-large members, and those members are also staff, and they serve on a rolling basis, on a 2-year basis, and that is made up of either librarians, which are generally our youth, it's made up of our youth service librarians, or anyone involved in collection development for adult materials. So in its current iteration, we have 2 youth services librarians on it, and 1 branch manager who is involved in ordering adult materials. It's a fairly large team.
So they have a budget of whatever, I don't really need to know the budget amount, but they have a budget. And they're charged with, I guess, looking at what's in the broad literature out there. Locally, regionally, nationally, regionally, locally, and making some decisions. We want to purchase these titles.
Purchasing doesn't actually happen with the collection development team. That happens at the branch level with our branch managers and our youth service librarians. We have a couple of adult service librarians. So that happens at the library level. The collection development team is more charged with things like this, when materials reconsideration requests come in, when there's questions about kind of our overarching collection development policy. Our policy is on, I want to say it's on a 3-year review schedule, and so they're charged with reviewing the policy every 3 years. And then kind of internal things that come up. So right now we're looking at standardizing our practices around the lending of non-traditional items. So it would be, we're looking at the procedures and policies around that. But that team itself, as a team, is not charged with, is not given a budget or charged with any purchasing, but every member on that team does do purchasing for their individual locations. That just doesn't happen in the context of the collection development team.
So for the branch, they're making, what drives their decisions on?
Sure, yeah. Here's a copy of the collection development policy.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Right here.
Right,
Yeah.
it's long. So a lot of different factors go into it. One is budget, one is square footage. I'm gonna pull it up. I'm not actually looking at it.
In a non-official capacity, I've been, led to believe that a big part is also involved, with community requests. So,
Mhm.
if I go to the library in West and I'm like, oh, you guys don't have, I don't know,
Books on geography.
whatever. Yeah, you don't have enough books about Minnesota. I'd like to read about Minnesota. Could you grab this book? That's something that I've been told is taken into consideration as well, just on my end as a library consumer.
So patron requests, if you look at the material selection part of the collection development policy, those are kind of our guidelines. Not every material has to check every box. It's hard for every material to check every box. But those are the guidelines that we use when we're looking at things. We consult review journals a lot, community feedback, community input.
So, I mean, I see this, I get it. Because there's just so many titles.
Yeah.
There has to be, I think, we need to build awareness of X, whatever X is.
Mhm.
It sounds like at a branch level, whoever the library director is looking at their collection,
Mhm.
and they may make a decision that we don't have enough titles in this space, whatever
Oh, yeah.
that space is.
Yeah.
That essentially,
Yeah, so especially if we are talking about your nonfiction section, for example, you can go and be doing an inventory or a reading and you're like, oh my goodness, all of my books about outer space were published before Pluto was decided it wasn't a planet.
Right.
I need to up this collection, keep it up to date, that kind of thing. So a lot of it.
it just seems to me there has to be a, I don't know, maybe a discipline of, in that example,
Mhm.
that this is a hot topic or this is an important topic.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a sense of, if I'm the branch manager. How, because there's just so much material out there, keeps me informed. Do the branch managers get together and say, hey, we think we need to do X, get
Mhm.
titles about outer space where Pluto's no longer a planet? I mean, for some, if you're not kind of thinking about that, which is, I would say, typical, you can't think about everything because the world is big, topics are big. How do they keep themselves kind of at the leading or cutting edge of, these are important things to do? Because just because of my experience, I may not think about that because I'm not thinking about outer space.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking more about home improvement books.
Sure.
Yeah, it is daunting, and there is a lot of dependence on the professional review journals, which you stay on top of a lot of trends. Our teams do talk with each other quite a bit.
So do branch managers get together in some forum, maybe on a variety of different topics?
So the branch managers meet twice a month and go over a variety of topics, related to branch management, public service issues, other questions. And there's a lot of informal discussion amongst managers. We occasionally will shift materials within branch, or a branch manager might have extra copies of a book that's not circulating in their location. So there's a lot of that informal collection sharing and feedback amongst the managers.
And we have data that we can pull from, so we have our circulation data, we have our hold request data that we can pull from, so we can see what's like in high demand and what we might need more of, so that those data reports get run a bit too. So we can.
So that does raise a question. So when I was looking, and not to discuss this material, but I was looking at where does this material sit today? I was gonna go out and look, but I didn't have time to go to some of the other branches and they weren't here.
Mhm.
So there's this dispersion of material. How do you balance that out? Or is there a need to balance that out? Since some branch may have, I think one branch had 3 copies and this one had none.
Mhm.
And it was too far. I didn't have time to drive, so I just didn't go.
Generally, from my perspective, when, like, I don't work at the library, but you can always interlibrary loan in Buncombe County. So if you needed a book to be brought to East that they don't have here, you can order it from.
Yeah, but it was more about, if this title is important. For whoever's making that decision.
Mhm.
You have 3 copies in one place and 0 somewhere else. Is there value in spreading that out? So every branch may have a copy instead of one have 3 and some other has 0.
Yeah, and that does happen sometimes, especially with copies that like pack the main library downtown. We'll wind up with additional copies of something. When it's newly published, we tend to buy multiple copies to help meet demand. And then as demand trails off and the items are circulating less and less, a lot of those copies could wind up being weeded if they're not checked out within a certain amount of time. But it's not unusual for a branch manager to say, okay, I've got extra copies of this. Does anybody else want it at their branch, or can I send a few copies of this to some other locations to try and spread those things around?
Yeah, so what I'm in part wondering, so that's the answer. Is there budgetary drivers to say, you know, I got 3 copies, this place doesn't have any. And if, the only way, if I have no copies over here, it hits my budget in some way, so I might be disincented to buy it or borrow it, or what? Again, it gets to one branch has 3 or 4 copies, another has 0.
Yeah.
There's just one big Buncombe County tax that we all pay.
Mhm.
Is there value in sharing the wealth?
Yeah, I think you'll see for most of like bestsellers, newly published items that we know are going to be really popular.
Yeah.
Almost all locations, the managers and the library there will be selecting those titles for their locations. So you'll see that widespread. Where that tends to drift off is when you get to older titles like these, the ones that have been challenged, or none of those are newly published. And so after items have been added to the collection, again, if they're not circulating after a certain amount of time, they may be weeded. So there could have been a time when more of our locations had copies of these materials, or any book that you select. It happened to be something that was popular here at East, and so never wound up being weeded because it continued to be used. But at our north and west branches, for whatever reason, that wasn't a topic that was popular there, never got checked out. Those books would kind of fall out of the collection over time. It's, we say library science, a lot of our folks have their masters in library science, but there's definitely an art to collection management as well too, and trying to balance those needs. One of the advantages of us having the branch-based collection development is that they can do some really hyper-local, specific to their neighborhood, their community need. You see that with some particular niche topics or things that may be safe. I struggle to think of one offhand, but it's not unusual for one of our branches to have a really strong collection on topic A, B, or C, because that's been in really high demand at that location. We also are fortunate because we do have the unified catalog that anybody can borrow any item from any location. And so I think that helps get to the difficulties that come from not having the exact same collection at every location. But it's a challenge.
Yeah, so I might dominate the questions if you let me. I forgot the number of branches, you know that better than me. do the branches have their own kind of culture or kind of focus? Are they, how different are the branches? Because it sounds like the branch manager and his or her team has degrees of discretion to buy and have in the collection certain things. Are they very different, the different branches?
Each branch definitely has its own flavor. So we have 12 locations if you don't count the law library, and I typically don't count the law library because that's unstaffed.
Where's that located?
It's in the courthouse.
In the courthouse.
You can.
You can, yeah,
It's in the older part in the tower.
in the tower. I used to go there a lot in college.
Yeah, it's worth popping into, and we do spend about $6,500, $7,000 a year on database access for that location. So that's some legal resources. Selection of items and collection development are some of the primary job responsibilities for the folks in our librarian and branch manager roles. So we do depend heavily on them and assign them a lot of responsibility for selecting materials. I'd say that each branch definitely has its own flavor and feel just based on the location and the architecture and the programs that are popular there. There's so much that goes into what gives a branch its feel beyond just the collection. And I've been here 18 months. What I've heard really clearly from the folks in our community is that that's one of the strong points of our library system. They like that each branch has its own really strong identity, its strong connection to its neighborhood and surrounding areas. It's also a challenge because with our facilities, you come here to East Asheville, it's new, beautiful, well-equipped. We have other locations that are significantly older and not at the same degree of access of resources for the community. So that's a challenge for sure, but it's something we're working on. And we also realize that we're at a point where the library system and the county need to re-engage in long-term planning and get some things on paper that are guiding goals and ideas for our library system moving forward, not just for facilities, but like growth and expansion of our services. And so I don't want to say we've been in a holding pattern, but we are in a period right now where like there's growing recognition that we've got to move forward with some significant planning. And as part of an overall evaluation of the library system, you know, it would include a review of the collection and the collection development policies and just taking a holistic look at everything we do. There's a lot to it. A lot of people would be surprised how many different tasks and elements go into librarianship and beyond just the materials on the shelves, but there are a lot of decisions, a lot of responsibility. I think we do a really good job being responsive to the community needs with our programs and our collection as well. But it's
Maybe it's just
tough.
me, maybe it could be helpful in a future meeting or material to send out before a meeting. Not necessarily focus on the meeting, but what are the tasks within the library? What's on that branch manager's plate and what's the team look like? Just to give us some insight.
just for awareness. Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, so 11 different branches, or 12, not counting the legal library.
Right.
And they have their own flavor. You got the building, maybe a degree of history, but you also have maybe the branch manager, his or her tenure may be a factor. How are they engaged, or is there some formal engagement with their geography?
So I could give you an example. Like your district is, if you go to your libraries, like my library is East Swannanoa and Black Mountain. All three libraries are completely different in how they serve their community and how their collections are and what is like their strengths. Like if you go to West Asheville, you'll find that they have a huge Lego like group there. That's not, it's just not related specifically to, but it's a lot of youth that come there. So out of that collection of books and new books, other things have grown inside that library that creates its own culture. Like Swannanoa is very geared towards a lot of kids. It's just a neighborhood library. You can walk to it. Like I live block and a half from the library. And so like they have a lot of programs that support the community in ways like we have moms and babies doing yoga in our park that is related to the library, where they don't have the capacity inside to hold, like in their storytelling, sometimes they go out into the park because the library is not big enough. And to like, they love that. The kids love that. They love to, and so then you go to Black Mountain, it's an older crowd. It's a lot of silver hair. It's a different setup. It's very, like if you go to Swannanoa, it feels like you're going into somebody's house library. It feels very cozy, very sitting at grandma's house and getting books off the shelf kind of feeling. And then Black Mountain it's got a lot of gardening, and it's got other things that focus on the community that is being served. And so they do, when you go in them, you can actually, like if you go in West Asheville, it's very different from Swannanoa. Swannanoa, on top of being, I think, our smallest because of the building that is being used. But then you also have Friends of the Library, you have all these other entities within, and even the book clubs are very different. But I can say this is our newest library, but I love the fact that each library fits the place that it's in.
Mhm.
Like it's really neat when you do get a chance to go to each one of them, how different PAC is from Black Mountain to what is the one that's off of is it Fairview, I think, Fairview Road or something like that. That, you know, a lot of their stuff is gardening. It's a focus around gardening, and the way this libraries are set up too is very set up to the culture of the community. And that's just, I don't know how to really put it in words, but I know it's want to know because I'm there a lot, and the ladies like do their best to make everything fit around the community and what books are being brought. Because like I found that I'm a comic collector, and our section on that is huge. Yeah, Swannanoa, and I'm like, Swannanoa is this little library, but I go in all the time, and they got new books. And then you use Libby, and if I need a book, they'll send it to the library to pick it up. It's just I love our. I don't know like Jason's part as the director, but I know as a consumer, like a person who goes to the library, I do appreciate how each library, like the one in Leicester, is very different from all the other libraries. But I guess they all have that flavor for whatever their community is. And I think that's the most important piece that keeps the libraries alive. Like Swannanoa, when they were thinking about closing it, I mean, our community response was incredibly amazing that, as soon as we got into the meeting, that was the first thing on the county commissioner's agenda. They was like, we're not going to change it as of now. And that is because like the community rallied to keep their library where they, just like Black Mountain, they rallied to keep, and there's so much support too, like the Friends of the Library in Swannanoa and Black Mountain, they had this huge event at White Horse, Black Mountain. And there's so much support specifically just for that library, so.
It's nice to feel proud, but I feel that the libraries in Buncombe County do tend to be very responsive towards the community. And I think that's part of, why you mentioned earlier, like, who do they answer to? Well, part of it is they answer to the community. That's why they send us these things, they're like, I don't feel that it's fitting the needs of the community. And I think it's part of, all of our job to say, like, as a community versus as an individual, or vice versa, like how can we all benefit greatly from it? And I do like our library system, and that I do feel there's a lot of input from so many different sources in education and in life experience. Everybody's got their own real different perspective on it, and I think it's something we do try to take into consideration in our community libraries. Yeah, I love the way you said it. You said you don't have words, but you illustrated it perfectly.
Yeah, I do. I enjoy it. Like they have a lot of sci-fi too at Swannanoa, and then they have like these groups that I went to one of their like Star Trek was huge. Like, I didn't even know. And then I met new neighbors. You know, like it was like a really great opportunity, not just to have the library is like the community hub too. It's like what creates the culture of the community. And you know, when I come here, I really enjoy seeing how the youth are utilizing the space where like I wish at Swanano we had the space to have the rooms like they have here and to see like neighborhood people using our computers and because they may not have one at home and they come and then like some of them are story writers and writing plays and productions. And then like here, my friend Penny, she comes here probably every day and she's writing plays and then she's rehearsing here. She's using the space. The library now it's like it's more than just books. It's almost like an opportunity for you to express your art, your hobbies, your gifts, and you can come and talk to a librarian. And if they don't have something, you can say, "Hey, I wonder if I could bring my group." And that's how the Star Trek thing got started at Swananoa. Someone just asked, and the librarian just made a decision. You know, I don't know how all of that plays out, but she takes great care and it's very safe too. That's another thing I have to say about our libraries. It is very safe, you know, to be in these spaces for hours at a time and not feel like you have to rush or get out. But you know, I mean, that might be off topic.
Questions. That community interaction, I think is critically important, very powerful, really needed. I remember a bazillion years ago when I was in school, elementary school, I hung out at the library and, you know, other things happened because of that, good stuff. A couple of the questions, I'll throw two of them out. Do library staff rotate around to different libraries? And the other is the interaction of that library, say with the school system, maybe around that library branch. And I don't know what, I would think there can be some power in, you know, the elementary schools, the junior high or senior high school, whatever, and the library that's closest having a positive role with those schools. Because, you know, it's kind of the after school stuff that can happen is the synergistic learning that can take place as a partnership with reading and those other things. So I kind of threw two things out there.
Yeah, our staff, our regular staff do not typically rotate locations, although it's not uncommon if somebody is out sick or on vacation or shortage that will send staff to locations. We do have a pool of library substitutes that can work anywhere in the system. They're kind of like on call and they help out at any location where there may be a staffing shortage. As far as the schools, we do work really closely with our local schools, public schools and charter schools and private schools. We were just looking at the numbers today, like 38,000 students in Buncombe County whose student IDs double as their library card number. So that is a great partnership because all you need is your student ID and you have access to library materials. That's heavily used and something that has gone over really well with the schools where we put that in place. Our youth services librarians at each location tend to develop their own individual relationships with the surrounding schools. They may go and do outreach visits. They may host, I see at PAC all the time, they may host field trips that come into the library for story time or other programs. They especially like to promote our annual summer reading program with school visits. And the goal there is to get people to participate all summer long to help avoid the summer slump. So I would say that our work with the schools and support of education is one of the most important things that the library does.
It makes me wonder if, you know, how do you support perceived best practices? So branch A and B, they're doing a couple really neat things. How does that get shared with the rest of the system?
We do a lot of sharing internally. a lot. We're a very open and communicative department, so the managers at our manager meetings, but also lots of regular communication amongst the different teams. Our youth services team is prolific users of their internal email. They also have regular youth services team meetings and annual retreats. So we do a lot of sharing. We utilize a SharePoint site where librarians will make flyers, share program ideas. There's just a lot of cross-pollination is a good word for it amongst the branches.
What about with other,
I did notice too, like our summer camps come to the library on a weekly basis. I've observed that Swannanoa, a lot of the summer camp kids coming with their, their matching t-shirts and going into the library. And so I don't know how that is with our Parks and Rec department, but I noticed this one particular summer camp, they got sky blue t-shirts, and they're there at least once a week at our library in Swannanoa. And then I met one of our substitutes at the Friends for the Library, and he was saying what you were saying about, he was saying that, when he was a kid, going to the library was safe for him. And he worked in the library system, I think 28 years.
That was Dave.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I got to sit with him and meet him. And then out of that discussion, I talked with the branch manager at Black Mountain, and she talked about a literary festival. And that's what I do, is festivals and things like that. And so I talked to her and I was like, wow, this is like just in this short time of sitting here for about 20, 30 minutes, you cultivate new relationships and opportunities that allow the community to grow in the library system. And one thing I do like too, if there's something that's not in our library, you can bring it to the attention of the library manager. And if it's within their policies and procedures and availability, like West Asheville, I was like, we never go to West Asheville for meetings. And you know why? Because their meeting room is always used. It's always like, it's never really free because they're always doing something in there. And I think that is like, wow, like it's like, yeah, it's like, that's pretty cool that they get the library, that space being utilized that much, where even the board of advisory, we can't get in because they're busy. And even in little old Swannanoa, it's like they pull off so many things. It's like, man, this little library is such an asset to our community. And then when we have events, we always have the library stays open later, and the people go in and then they take like books that are, I guess they're not, decommissioned or not used anymore. That brings money for opportunities to the library, because you sell those books and then that funding can help do other things. So I think that's a wonderful part of our library system too.
Quick question, since this is not an official trustee, would it be all right if I excuse myself? Totally, but I appreciate meeting
Yeah.
Julio. Thank you.
Thanks, so. I'll communicate with everybody when I know our next steps for handling this materials thing. So
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, God, my people. It's-
I had 3 more questions and I just lost.
Oh, okay.
They'll come. What about partnerships with other library systems? Because almost every community has one, and they're doing good things for their communities. How does the system share? I assume there's regional, national conferences, or both electronic and face-to-face, those kind of things.
Yeah, so several different ways. I'd say the biggest way that we share is literal sharing of resources. We're part of the North Carolina Cardinal Consortium, which is over 40 different library systems across North Carolina that all share their materials. So if you are interested in something that we don't have in Buncombe County, or even in Western North Carolina, another library system on the eastern part of the state might have it, you can check it out for free. We'll send it to your location. Buncombe County in particular is think the system that sends the
We send
highest-
out the most.
we send out more materials to other library systems than anybody else in Cardinal, so we do a lot of sharing. We also receive a lot. As far as sharing of ideas, there are various email lists, listservs, discussion groups for different. There's a cataloging discussion group, there's
Mhm.
library directors discussion group.
Mhm.
There's statewide support for the different focus areas. And we do routinely send our staff to various conferences. There's every other year, the North Carolina Library Association has their conference. In the years in between that, the Public Library Association has their conference, and then every year, the American Library Association has their annual conference. And so we typically have multiple applications from staff to go as professional development. We've also had staff members in various levels serve on statewide committees, go do presentations, attend national conferences, do committee work. So we try to stay as tapped in as we can. Professional development is one of the areas where our budget's tight. I want to continue to push to see that grow because I think supporting staff is like the best thing that we can do to keep our library system relevant and engaged with trends and what's happening. But we do as much of that as we possibly can.
That's where I was going to go. That's one of the questions that got lost, budget. And how is it not so much managed, but every year you're getting funds from, I guess, the county and I guess any state and the national. And what are the pressures that, are you facing unusual pressure? Given everything that's going on politically, as well as just, everything's tight, so.
Everything's tight, absolutely. That was the refrain that we kept hearing over and over. And going into this current fiscal year, it's a tight budget year, it's a tight budget year. So the vast majority of our funding comes directly from Buncombe County. We're a full county department, and so we receive almost all of our operating funds from them. We do, as a public library in North Carolina, receive this year, I think it's about $280,000 in state aid that is allocated by the State Library of North Carolina, and it's accounted for in the state budget. So it's a statewide thing. But almost everything is dependent on Buncombe County.
What about grants and things like that?
We do pursue grants. There are two outside groups that we seek a good amount of support from. One is the Trust Fund for Buncombe County Public Libraries, separate 501c3. They have their own board, and actually in Justice's capacity as the chair, he's also on that board. They support library staff and services and capacity building. I usually have at least one staff member who is working through graduate school who's having their tuition paid by the trust board. It's a great thing. We also get a lot of support from the Friends of Buncombe County Public Libraries. There's an umbrella organization for most of the Friends groups, and then each branch kind of operates as its own group. They primarily fund library programming, but occasionally will kick in funds for materials, furniture, furnishing, special projects. And then we pursue other grants as they become available through, we're working on one right now through Dogwood Health Trust for digital equity. There are also federal funds available through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So a variety of different options for grants. Yeah, there's a lot of money out there for libraries, and it gets very
And
competitive.
there's all the private foundations as well,
Yes,
billions of dollars.
and so the trust board is about to embark on some serious long-term planning to kind of figure out what is the future of that organization and how can they potentially grow to help further support the library in bigger impact ways. Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to run out of questions.
If you think of more, like, I
Yeah.
mean, email,
Yeah,
call
almost.
anytime, we could set up a meeting. Also, I haven't forgotten about library orientation. In fact, I met last week with the new clerk to the commissioners. And so she's working on some orientation materials for all new boards and commission members. She also said that they are working on more streamlined communication for notification about appointments and terms and renewals and all of those things. So I think you'll see increased communication about that.
That's good.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Too bad we didn't have quorum.
I know, we
Do
could,
we have to do something to adjourn or do we just quit?
I think we just call it, or I think
Yeah.
Justice could just call it to a close.
You have any other questions? Anything?
Some may come up, particularly after I talk with my librarian savant. I'll explain that once the screening's over.
Well, I will bring this meeting to a close and adjourn and